Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 496.
Not enough.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Scott gives us the history of a classic game that he loves, and VJ proceeds to tell us how bad that game is. Brian escorts us into the age of discovery, and Max makes sure our executive functions are working properly. Plus, we have tales of horror and friendship. We answer a question from the mailbag about pushing too hard when sharing our hobby with non-gamers, and we wonder at what level of component quality we'll refuse to play a game. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Pierce Brosnan to my Dame Judi Dench, Tom Vassell.
Ba-dum, ba-da-na-na, na-na, ba-dum, ba-dum. Sorry.
The world is not enough.
I like that movie, actually.
They all blend together. All the Pierce Brosnan ones seem to blend together for me.
I liked them all, though. They were, like, over-the-top idiotic.
They were over the top, for sure. The one where he drove the car through the melting ice castle. Which one was that?
We're going to look really bad. I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't think not knowing that makes me look really bad.
No.
Because they all blend together.
Wow. Come on now.
It wasn't the best Bond movie, let's just say that.
Actually, no, it's not. It's not that one. Okay. That'd be really weird if it was The World Is Not Enough.
If it actually was The World Is Not Enough?
No, it's not. It's not. I don't know which one it was. Okay. It's one of them.
Yeah.
Anywho, welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Tom Vassell.
Hi there, I'm Eric Summerer.
And we are here to talk about all sorts of things, and most of those are just games. So I do want to mention, though, we do need to mention this every once in a while. Would you like to continue the conversation later on? Well, you can do that at Dice Tower Forums. You can find a link to them on our website at dicetower.com. Also, did we mention that there's a new website for Dice Tower Con? If you haven't got a ticket for that, you probably should, because they might be gone by now.
You should, but they've lasted a little bit longer, which is good.
Oh, yeah, but man, it's going to be a great convention. So many people are coming. Over 2,000 signed up so far. So
wow.
Lots of fun. So, yay. Great things are afoot. Let's see if the games can hold up to that. Eric, give us a great game.
Okay. Let's start with Bear Valley. This is from Stronghold Games. Tom talked about this some time ago, so I won't go into too much detail. But it's an exploration game. Where you were trying to get your character from a base camp all the way to another camp. It's like a start and finish space, basically. And you are exploring the woods. You can't just walk up the river. You have to explore the woods to get to the other end here. And it's got a very interesting exploration mechanism, whereas you start from one space and you'll say 1 o'clock and draw a card, and as long as the card has a certain number of exits from it, you can continue. But as you go, it gets more and more treacherous to move along during one turn. But you can always stop, and you can do sort of pick up equipment and just rest. Sometimes you have to stop if you hit a body of water. But there is always the danger that you bust on a turn and don't actually make any progress, or you run into a bear and get eaten by a bear. You don't want that. And there's a lot of specific rules about, if this is only the 1 o'clock draw and you run into a bear, you're okay and you can crawl through the underbrush. And if it's only the 2 o'clock, you certain rules apply if certain cards are drawn, and it's a little crunchy in that way. I certainly would recommend the advanced game, where you have lots of equipment and stuff to pick up and various challenges, ropes that can get you from one level to another. And there's rules about how much money you have. Like you can't move through someone unless you have more money than they do. there's also an alternate victory condition that if you have 3 gold, if you pick up 3 coins throughout the course of the board and make it back to the main camp, the start space, you win that way. I guess you hire a helicopter to fly you out of there. And it just never flowed for me. I usually like Carl Chudik's designs, and this one, it was interesting. I like exploration games, but there's just so many opportunities for things to get a little wonky.
I'm telling you, you wouldn't even know it was his game if I didn't tell you.
Yeah, maybe. Like, we had a guy that won, like, he just explored off totally in the wrong direction from getting to the finish space and just managed to find 3 gold coins, and no one else was near him. No one could stop him. He just wandered back to the start and won. And it just felt really counter to what the point of the game was. And based on what some of the card draws are, the map tiles, and the way they interact, it felt... Elegant is not the word that I would apply to this game.
Yeah, that's actually true, for sure.
I would apply that to many of his other games, so this one just felt off to me. This was not... I'm not going to recommend this one. Bear Valley.
Man, I liked Bear Valley, although I said that I have 2 main problems with it. One is the advanced rules are ridiculous. You don't need them at all, and I'm tired of looking up everything to see what it does.
Yeah.
So if you look at it as a super light game, it's fine, but I can't get past that graphic design, though. It hasn't aged well. And by hasn't aged well, I mean, come on now. That wouldn't have looked good in the 90s. So it's unfortunate. Well,
all the
they
characters
can't all
have
be
this
winners.
dead-eyed look to them. It just doesn't look interesting.
Yeah, but the good news is that Stronghold has had a really great slate of games for Essen, so they can probably not worry about Bear Valley too much.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to talk about Picassamo. I think I'm saying this correct. This is a new game from Haba that is a game in which Eric will get a card, and he has to draw something, and everyone's going to guess what it is. But you're drawing it on 6 white tiles that are put together into a board. After everyone is done drawing behind their shield, we will turn over a card and it will say, switch tiles 2 and 3 and switch tiles 1 and 6. Or something along that line. So you switch them. Then you put out your pictures and have people guess what they are. And you are required to put something in every tile when you're drawing a picture. You can't draw the whole thing in the center tile.
Right.
So if you think it's hard to guess people's bad drawings, it's even more hard when you mix this up.
Yeah.
Now, Picassamo falls into that party game style of, hey, is there a game? Who cares? Let's just play it and see what happens.
Right.
That's really the best way to play it, right?
Yeah.
Just draw the pictures, mix them up. Each card has 3 levels in it, of difficulty. And you have to decide at the beginning of the game which one to play. Who cares? It's just like concept. Just pick any word off the card, and we'll all try to guess it after you mix them up. And that makes it a lot more fun. Because some words are just easier than others. Mm-hmm. And some words, because I had the word bicycle. So I was able to draw a bicycle, but the whole tire of the bicycle, with the spokes, was in one tile. So it didn't matter if it got mixed up. You could see that, and you would know it was bicycle. Other pictures, when you mix them up, were really hard. So I really like the concept of this. It's a really fun concept. And so if you play it as an activity rather than a game, I think it will be really fun. That's Picassamo. This is another game in the ever-increasing family line from Haba. They've really, I'm really excited about this line.
Yeah. Next up for me is a kid's game called Tricky Track.
Tic-tac. Tricky Track.
Tricky Track. It's a race game. And you have an elephant and a cat. And there's this nice serpentine track with various shapes on it, 6 different shapes. And also, some of those spaces have either mice or dogs on them. And the cat starts on one end of the track, and the elephant starts on the other end of the track. And the elephant, if it lands on a dog, gets to move again. But if it lands on... Actually, if it doesn't move again, it moves to the next version of... hang on. You roll a die. with a symbol on it. And it's kind of like Candyland. So if I roll a circle, I can move the guy to the next circle in front of him. If that circle has a mouse on it, and I am an elephant, I am scared of mice, so I have to move back to the previous circle. If it, however, has a dog on it, then I got to move to the next of those symbols. There we go. The cat is the opposite. The cat wants mice and will move again with the mouse, and is afraid of dogs and will move backwards. So you roll the die and decide which of your guys you want to move. It's decision-making, which is certainly a skill that the kids need to learn, but it's pretty simple decision-making. And eventually, your guys are going to pass each other, and you're trying to get to both guys to the finish lines at the end of the course. Once you get one guy into the finish line, the game becomes far less interesting because now your choice is gone, and you're just rolling the die hoping that you get the symbols you need in order to complete. And, of course, there's a whole bunch of move backward spaces for the particular animal near the end of the game. So there's a lot of looping and, having to you need the one symbol to get to the end, and you have to get past it. Don't roll a circle, and you do, and then you have to move backwards, stuff like that. So, yes, a good training game for kids, not very interesting for adults, and it has an end game that, The kids enjoyed it, but I don't really think there are other better kids games. Tricky Track.
Eric, did you listen at the beginning of the game, this thing I said, let's talk about some great games?
Yeah.
You have not been following these instructions.
I have not.
Eric is a rebel.
I'm really sorry.
All right. I'm going to now jump to Renegade Games, Castles of Calandale.
Okay.
Now, in this game, you are building a castle out of tiles. Think Carcassonne style. Each person starts with a doorway to their castle, and then you have a bunch of tiles that are in the middle of the table, and on your turn you take one of those tiles, or you can take a face-down tile from a stack. That's up to you. Once you take the tile, you can stick it in a score pile where it will be worth 1 point at the end of the game, or, more likely, you will add it to your castle. There are 3 different types of material. There's tree, stone, and Victorian mansion house thing, whatever it's called. And the tiles are made up of different combinations of those and sky. And when you take a tile, you can stick it anywhere you want in your castle, following some basic building rules. Except you can rearrange your castle whenever you feel like it. So it's not like Carcassonne, a tile laid is not a tile played. So if you later on get a tile, you're like, ooh, I can stick this one between these 2 tiles. You can do so. However, if you take a tile and decide it goes in your castle, it's going in your castle. You can't decide later on to put it in your score pile, and vice versa. So you keep doing this till all the tiles are gone. Then everyone will score their castle. You get 2 points for every tile in your castle. You lose 2 points for each tile that has like an exposed edge that's not completely closed off. You get 1 point for each tile in your score pile. Most points is the winner. There's a few other minor things that are involved in the game, but every tile has unique art. And when you're done, your castle looks cool. And in fact, the rules say, hey, just give the kids a little build a castle. And they will. And it will be fun. So I like the game for that alone. I love these kind of connection games. One that lets me build this really cool looking weird castle, I'm on board with. It's simple. It's fun. I recommend it. Castles of Calandale.
All right, let's end with a game that I know is popular. It's called chess. So we've touched on chess.
Is this a Knizia game?
No. This is older than that. We've touched on the lifestyle of chess a little bit here on the program, but my son is in a chess club, and he recently went to his first chess tournament ever. And this was an experience I was not sure what to expect. Turns out they sequester the parents, so I spent the entire morning and most of the afternoon just sequestered in the gymnasium while my son went to various rounds in the cafeteria at this school for the chess tournament. So they'd all run off to their rounds, and then they'd come back in pairs, one of them happy and one of them sad because they had won or lost the game. My son only won 1 out of his 5 matches, but for his first tournament, that's great. That's terrific. The funny part came when they awarded trophies to some of the participants. They gave trophies to like the top 5 placers. The guy who won the under 800, because this is all based on your chess ranking, which is a system. Jeff has done a game tech on this, but I still don't understand it. Even having listened to that and looked it up on the internet, I don't understand how chess ranking works. If you were under 800, you were in this particular bracket, and most of the people in that tournament were kids. Except there was one high school student, like a 17-year-old, who destroyed all the kids and won the tournament, so yay for him. And then they gave awards to the schools. So if many of you were from the same school, you could be qualified for a point-based total that would win you an award. But you had to have 3 kids there, and it looked like there were only 2 from my son's school. So I was like, yeah, he didn't make it. Suddenly, they announce that second place is my son's school. And he jumps up, he and his friend jump up from the school, and then 2 other kids jump up. And at first I'm like, oh, well, I guess 2 other kids from his school showed up. And then as they're jumping up and down and celebrating this trophy, they look at each other and go, you're not from my school. Turns out there were 2 schools with the same name, and they just combined them. So it was this alliance that they had created and didn't realize it. And that alliance from across the state of Connecticut won second place at this tournament. And rather than correct the error, they just said they were going to get a trophy for both schools. So my son at his first tournament got second place, but he only won 1 match.
That is the most interesting story I've heard in a while. That's fascinating. No, I'm not being sarcastic.
I wasn't sure.
That actually is interesting to me.
It's fascinating.
I'm trying to think how you recover from that. Like the guy,
I knew that there was no way that the 2 of them won that award. And I was trying to get them to come to the conclusion that maybe they should give the trophy to the 2 other kids from the other school who scored far more points than they did.
Would those other 2 kids have gotten first place?
They also would not have been eligible because there were only 2 of them. So the 2 groups of 2 would not have been eligible, either of them, to win a trophy without their combining into an alliance and having 4 kids.
Did the third place school parents start swinging baseball bats?
No one from the third place school, I think, realized there was a problem.
But you just said it on the...
I know.
Someone listen to the podcast.
Hopefully none of them from the host school that got third place are listening to the podcast. I'm really sorry.
How many schools were there?
I don't know how many were eligible to win the trophy. It may have only been 3, including our alliance.
It's so confusing sometimes, these tournament things.
I think they just were like, forget it. We're not going to recalculate all this. Everybody wants to go home. People got trophies. They're happy. Goodbye. But then, they brought the trophy to the school on Monday, and the principal took their picture, and they're smiling and stuff. And I'm like, I want to be supportive and happy for him.
Don't ruin the moment, Eric.
But at the same time, the rules lawyer in me is going, yeah, but he didn't actually get it. Officially, they earned a trophy, and they did so through an alliance that they didn't even know they were in.
This is going to happen. In about 10 years, Eric's son's they're going to be arguing. Son will be like, oh, whoa, blah, blah, blah. And Eric will be like, oh, yeah, well, that trophy, you never earned that trophy there.
At least they don't get to keep the trophy. The trophy went to the school, so it's not like I've got a trophy in the house that is illegitimate that I need to put an asterisk on.
Oh, my goodness, Eric, let it go.
I can't. Okay, moving on.
All right, I got nothing to top that. All right. All right, Lady Richmond is a game from Haba. This is a game where Lady Richmond died, no one liked her, and you're all there to grab her stuff. There's a lot of games that have this as a premise, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's a bunch of cards, and you're slowly turning them over one. You put 7 cards in the middle of the table, and you slowly turning them over one at a time, and not until someone's like, "Oh, I want to bid on these cards," and then you bid on just the face-up cards, and it's a round-the-table auction. And then you just keep going. That's the whole game. It's okay. There's a couple cards when you turn them over. It's like, oh, these cards are all wiped out. No one gets them now. Or there's a card that when it's turned over, it says, this auction, we're bidding on the face-up and face-down cards. Well, that's fascinating. Suddenly that becomes much more interesting. the cards have different values, like 1 to 5 or whatever. So some cards are worth more than others. And that's, it's a basic game. But I really wish they had done something similar to Felix the Cat in a Sack, where all the cards are there and you're bidding on all of them, but you're slowly turning them over. You want to see, because there's negative point cards too. And at any point you could be like, I'm going to take these cards, but some of them might be bad, so I'm not sure. I want to wait till there's more cards. Do you know what I mean? So it's an okay game. It's fine. It's just that I don't think it stands out at all in the I want to take the possessions of this old person no one liked, yet we all hung around because of greedy backstories. What's that story you read as an audio book? That's the whole plot. The Westing.
Oh, the Westing game. Yes.
The Westing game. Actually, I think they liked that person, right? They liked him? I can't remember.
It's been a while. Yes, he was beloved.
Like that concept's good. And the Westing game is a great book, everybody. You should read it.
No, it is.
Or listen to it. Eric prefers that.
Yes, please.
But anyhow, that's Lady Richmond from Haba, an okay game.
All right.
Now let's talk about a bad game, kind of? Maybe, or not.
Presenting Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
This time I want to talk about a game that, in its quiet way, changed the entire board gaming industry. The fantasy board game Dungeon. The story begins with 2 players joining the Midwest Military Simulation Association, Dave Arneson and Dave Meaghery. The 2 enjoyed all manner of war games, but eventually gravitated towards medieval simulations. In 1971, Arneson, Meaghery, and their group started playing Chainmail Fantasy Miniatures, a game created and published by Gary Gygax of nearby Lake Geneva. Their games evolved to have players create their own characters that explored a dungeon under Blackmore Castle, fighting the monsters that dwelled there and looting their treasure. The Blackmore role-playing games were enthralling, but the 14-hour gaming sessions were taxing on Arneson. Meaghery wanted to simplify Chainmail's gameplay and create a game that his friend could play without the time-intensive overlord duties. Taking inspiration from Blackmore's dungeon setting, Meaghery created his prototype in 72 hours, sleeping only for short periods of time as he cut and pasted together his game's dungeon map. Meaghery's sister Patty drew the interstitial art found on the board. He used Chainmail's 4 character archetypes, wizard, elf, hero, and superhero, but limited their abilities. Meaghery says his greatest challenge was working out the right ratio of monster difficulty to treasure payoff. He called his prototype the Dungeons of Pashakada. In Dungeon, players explore a dungeon divided into levels of increasing difficulty. As players venture deeper into the dungeon, the monsters become more difficult and the treasure more valuable. Combat is resolved with dice, determining the effects of the battle. The winner is the first player to bring a certain amount of treasure back to the dungeon's entrance. Meaghery took his prototype to the Blackmore Gaming Group, where it was a big success. Arneson finally got to play along with the group. Meaghery wrote to Parker Brothers in December of 1972, but they weren't accepting submissions. Arneson suggested that Meaghery meet with Gary Gygax, so they traveled to Lake Geneva to play the game. Gygax loved the game and presented it to Don Lowry of Gaiden Games. However, Gaiden decided it would be too expensive to print. Gygax then shopped it along with his newly created role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons to Avalon Hill. It was this rejection that resulted in Gygax forming his own company, Tactical Studies Rules, otherwise known as TSR, and published Dungeon in 1975, which was introduced at the very first Origins gaming convention. The game was a big success and featured a cover by Larry Kessling. It sold 3,000 copies in the first year, and by 1980 had sold 500,000 copies. Gygax bought the game from Meaghery for 7.5% of TSR's stock. The 1980 edition had some changes. Most notably, the roles were changed to the now familiar Dungeons & Dragons archetypes, Fighter, Wizard, Cleric, and Rogue. The box cover and board were painted by famous D&D artist Jim Rosloff, and card art by Rosloff and Dave LaForce. Another edition was released by TSR in 1989 called New Dungeon. Co-designed by Jeff Grubb, this version had a larger playing board, updated rules, and new character classes represented by 6 miniature figures. The classic Dungeon was released in 1992, but other than the box cover, there really isn't much difference between these 2 versions. After TSR was purchased by Wizards of the Coast, an updated version was released in 2012, emblazoned with the Dungeons & Dragons branding, and a painted cover by Michael Cormack. The combat system was redesigned, as was the way the monster cards interacted with the board. A second version of the same game designed to appeal to younger players was released in 2014 with a cartoony cover by Victoria Moderna. Dungeon is the first fantasy board game to replicate a dungeon crawl. There's even some debate to who even created the dungeon crawl, Arneson or Megary. But no matter who's responsible, Dungeon's influence can be felt on subsequent games like Dungeon Quest, Descent, Mice and Mystics, Super Dungeon Explorer, and of course the Dungeons & Dragons adventure board games. If your character has ever stalked down a monster-infested hallway in the promise of golden treasure, you have Dungeon to thank for it.
Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
Hey, board gamers, BJ from Boardgame Gumbo here, back with more Louisiana flavor. Way back in the 70s and 80s, TSR, the publisher of Dungeons & Dragons, came out with their own board game, appropriately named Dungeon. It was a simple roll and move game, but it was unique from so many other mass market games because it had that D&D theme. Players could become fighters or wizards and explore the depths of a dungeon, fighting off dangerous monsters along the way. The winner was the one who survived the dungeon with the most loot. My original copy of Dungeon has been lost to history, but when I had my own family, I thought I'd bring back the magic, and I found a copy on eBay. It didn't shock me when my young preteens loved the game. What shocked me was, well, how boring it was. I never could find a simple game that captured the spirit of Dungeon, but with modern-day mechanics, until I discovered Clank. Clank is a deck-building dungeon diving adventure game published by Renegade Games in 2016 in conjunction with Direwolf Digital. It plays 2 to 4 players. It's listed at 30 to 60 minutes to play a game, but you'll probably find that it's going to take about 90 minutes, especially for your first game. Instead of rolling and moving your character through the dungeon, would-be adventurers use the same deck-building mechanic from Dominion to build an adventure deck, explore the dungeon, steal the dragon's treasure, and try to make it back to the surface alive. The thief who has the most treasure points after everyone has exited the cave or been knocked out is the winner. Each starting deck has 10 cards, which help the adventurer move through the dungeon and buy ever more powerful cards. But watch out, because most of the best cards, and some in the starting deck, produce clank, that noise you don't want to make when your armor bangs around and you wake up the sleeping monster in the next chamber. Make too much noise, or draw the wrong card, and the dragon wakes up. When the dragon attacks, the more clank you've added to the dragon bag, the more chance you have of taking damage and not escaping. What a great game and great design. The board is colorful, the game plays quickly, and it's easy to teach. The box even comes with a great insert that holds sleeve cards. My only complaint is that there could be a few more cards in the supply to help you color your deck, but there's an expansion on the way, so hopefully that'll be addressed. The game feels fresh. While it certainly is a deck builder, at its heart, Clank is really a board game. There's lots of decisions to be made. How far down in the dungeon do you go? Which of the valuable relics, artifacts, and special powers will you try to secure? Are you keeping an eye on your fellow adventurers, ready to make a run for the surface when the moment is right? The combination of the Clank mechanism and the deck-building mechanics, they're spot on. If your game group goes ho-hum every time someone pulls out Dominion, or you fondly reminisce about that dungeon game from your youth, I suggest you head on down to your friendly local game store and pick up a copy of Clank. Until next time, laissez le bon temps rouler.
So we don't usually have contributors arguing with each other, but that was interesting.
Well, here's the deal. Dungeon was fine, I guess. It was like an opening salvo, like, hey, we can take Dungeons and make it into a board game.
Mm-hmm.
Great. You know, and I played it and I've had fun with it, but it doesn't hold up at all today. It came out a few years ago. They reprinted it.
Right.
And my daughter liked it, and I was like, okay, I can see the fun in it. But yeah, after playing Clank and things like that,
right.
No, I'm not going back to Dungeon.
Yes.
Clank is the exact same theme. Get in, get out.
It's true. And I would much rather play Clank. My kids enjoy Dungeon as well. I got them the reprint. But yeah, I would much rather play Clank.
And they probably will too once they understand how the deck building parts of that work.
Sure.
So, sorry, Gumbo wins.
Ding ding.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror.
Oh my, that's horrific.
Gather round, children. I was at my local game night playing a 5-player game of Dead of Winter. Daniel, Josh, Chris, Christian, and I were all ready to get into it, and I was hoping that the game would have all of the great things about it show up. Zombie killing, of course, but also some good old-fashioned thematic moments of paranoia. All of us had played except for one, Chris, and he lit up when I told him the game was similar to Battlestar Galactica. He said he had logged probably 200 hours playing BSG and was an expert at sussing out Cylons. I figured he'd latch on easily, and no one skipped a beat as I went over the rules summary. The first turn went pretty well. We were playing the kill them scenario, so there were plenty of zombies to kill, and we were making quick work of them. Things looked good. Then came the first crisis resolution. There were 8 cards in the stack, 3 more than necessary to defeat the crisis. However, as I shuffled and then turned them over, 2 of them were incorrect. We failed the crisis by 1 card and had to lose 2 morale. There was a traitor amongst us. A rather intense discussion began immediately about this. We ruled out Christian because he hadn't contributed any cards. Josh had only contributed 1, so that didn't make sense either. It was either Chris, Daniel, or me. I knew I wasn't the traitor. I had put in 2 food cards like I was supposed to. Was it the shifty Daniel or the BSG veteran, Chris? We all agreed there wasn't enough evidence one way or the other, but Josh, who tends to get very impassioned about these sorts of things, felt he knew it was Daniel. On Josh's next turn, he called to exile Daniel from the compound and made a convincing argument for it. Chris defended himself well, also, but Daniel couldn't seem to come up with a worthy defense. I reminded everyone we had to be careful, because if we exiled 2 loyal members, we lost immediately. Nonetheless, the tribunal continued. Daniel was subsequently and unanimously put out in the cold. But wait, what's this? We were so sure. Daniel said he was loyal and showed us his secret objective to prove it. He then proceeded to confess he had put one of the erroneous cards into the crisis in an effort to suss out a traitor. This didn't make much sense to any of us. I was flabbergasted. We all turned and looked to Josh. Not only did he bring this wrong accusation, but it now looked like he was in fact the traitor, as he had only put 1 card into the crisis contributions. I knew that it could also be Chris. I even thought so pretty strongly at one point, but he hadn't done anything that seemed traitorous. We moved on to finish the second round. This time the crisis was averted. Things were looking up, despite the fact that one of us was a traitor. I thought we could still avert disaster. As we entered the third round, tensions were high. Chris called to exile Josh. Christian and I looked at each other. It was a hard choice, but I still couldn't make up my mind between Josh and Chris. I also knew that since Chris was the first player that round, he would break a tie vote. If he was wrong about Josh, or even worse, if he was the traitor, the game would be over. Josh was flamboyant as ever in his defense, but was struggling to make a good logical argument. It didn't look good. Still, I couldn't stand to lose on turn 3 by voting out another loyal player. When the votes were cast, Josh was saved. Then things got bad. Josh immediately accused Christian of being the traitor, even though he hadn't contributed any cards at all to the first turn's crisis. I thought Josh was crazy, grasping at straws, flailing in the water, and now clearly the traitor. There was little doubt in my mind about that now. Why else would he try to vote out a clearly loyal player? Needless to say, Josh stood alone in his vote. Christian was saved. Next came Christian's turn. He acted as any loyal player would and said he would leave it up to me to make the decision whether or not to vote for Josh's exile. It all came down to this. My heart was heavy. I was 90% sure Josh was the traitor, but I couldn't shake a nagging feeling that the BSG veteran Chris was playing us like a fiddle. Still, I went with my gut and nailed Josh to the wall of exile. But what's this? I was sure I'd see betrayal marked on Josh's secret objective card, but no such luck. He was loyal? But how? Why would he have done the things he did? Chris had won, But wait, what's that? Chris flipped his card and he was loyal too? Ah! Then everyone looked at me. I was the traitor. I flipped my card over. But wait, I was loyal too, as was Christian. We determined that Josh had put a bad card into the pile on the first turn on accident. He finally realized that he had thought he could contribute extra cards to the crisis to gain morale. He said he was texting when I read those rules. There was no traitor. We all sat at that table. We were in complete disbelief. We had betrayed ourselves with our paranoia. We were all traitors.
I love this.
Always pay attention.
I love this because I was looking over the story and I was like, oh, it's another one of those Battlestar Galactica stories where everyone's a traitor, blah, blah, blah. But no, they were all innocent. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Which is, I guess that's the point. You don't know if there's a traitor.
Yeah, I like that you don't know about that fact. Okay, well, let's go back in time and take a look at Age of Empires 3.
Welcome to Cult of the Old, where I discuss games we may have forgotten about or games that failed miserably but still had some good mechanics in them.
He's Brian Counter, and everything he does is counterproductive.
Today, I wanted to talk about Age of Empires 3, The Age of Discovery. Came out in 2007, designed by Glenn Drover, rated to rank 7.6 and 111 on Boardgame Geek. Note this game was reprinted later and re-implemented as Empires Age of Discovery. I'm going to give a really brief summary here because I know this game is still out there and people still talk about it. It's just that it's 10 years old now and I can talk about it, and it's still one of my favorite games. My intention with this segment has always been to bring a little joy to tables of games that are just older and still good or got overlooked, and this one has not been overlooked, but it's still a great game, so I bring it to the attention of listeners who may be around the hobby for a shorter time than the rest of us. This game is a worker placement game where players sail to the New World to expunge unsuspecting natives for victory points in settling the New World. Players take colonists, put them on the boat to come over. They can put them in different boxes to exchange them for other types of workers, like a priest. Once he gets over to the New World, he magically turns into 2 colonists. Someone with the gun will happily kill someone else later for victory points. A captain sails the ship over, and those kinds of things, which is all fun. You can acquire goods for victory points and other things. You can develop things for victory points and in-game advantages, Civ style, and you obviously get more points for more territories that you've acquired by the end of the game. Now, this is a long game with a lot of moving parts, but neither is it too long, nor is it feel spreadsheety. It's just some good fun, you feel involved, you're building stuff, and I think it's a great time. Truth in lending, I have not played the updated version, but I've been told the board is more readable, which is great, and the player tokens for workers have a different base for the different workers to tell them apart a little bit better because they all kind of blended together earlier. So these are good things. So if that sounds appealing to you, consider Age of Empires 3, The Age of Discovery, / Empires Age of Discovery.
Mr. Vassal. Tom Vassal. Will there be a Dice Tower theme park?
If you were a die, what sort of die would you be?
Will there be a Vicious Fishes movie? And now the Dice Tower will authoritatively, definitely, possibly, maybe answer your questions.
Tom, which way to the bathroom?
Lars says, recently I've been digging through my old gaming statistics, and while it's been fun thinking back to all the different games I've played, one thing struck me. Especially when I had just gotten into board games, I was so enthusiastic about the hobby that I would introduce games to anyone at any time with little to no thought of what would make a good experience. How was I thinking when I insisted that we'd play Battlestar Galactica at a family gathering, when everyone actually wanted to play Trivial Pursuit? Or how could I possibly imagine that Race for the Galaxy would be a great game to introduce at a couple's dinner, even though the couple in question wasn't really into gaming? I'd like to say that I don't make these mistakes anymore, but honestly, I think I still occasionally fall into the same trap. So, to my questions. Do you think this behavior is a typical board gaming behavior, or just a typical geeky behavior? Do you have any embarrassing memories of introducing games which in retrospect might not have been the best idea? I often use the term analysis paralysis. Is there a similar term for this behavior? If not, I think someone should make one up.
Okay, so 3 questions here. The first is this board gaming typical board game behavior? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
I think everybody does this at some point. You learn about these new games, and everyone must play them now.
It's easy to make the mistake that everyone else is going to be just as enthusiastic about this new find of yours than you are. And
really, it's deflating for a lot of people when you teach people these new games, and they're like, yeah, it's okay. And you're like,
yeah,
what? Is there something wrong with you? Do I have embarrassing memories of introducing games, which may have not been the best idea? That's happened. I don't know if it's been embarrassing. I know that I've introduced a lot of games, and I was like, whoa, this ain't working. But I usually bail if I think something's not working. I'll say, well, you know what? Maybe we should play Apples. Yay!
Well, we mentioned Tigris and Euphrates. It was on our top 10 list last week. And I almost broke my friends. We were doing a gaming weekend, and on Sunday we were going to leave, around 1 or 2 o'clock. And we said, let's do one more game. And we had all, stayed up late to play games the night before. And this was pre-kids. And so we were staying up late and playing as much as we possibly could. And I just assumed that they would want to play another game. Let's make this last one count. And I pulled out Tigris and Euphrates. And trying to get the concept of internal versus external conflict, when really I think everybody just wanted to play a game that we had already played earlier that weekend, that we didn't have to teach and learn. And everyone started getting frustrated, and really, it was the wrong choice for that point in the weekend. And I just assumed that everyone would be just as enthusiastic about learning another new game as I was. And I was wrong.
Wait, you taught it from scratch, like you didn't even know it?
Oh, I knew it. No, I knew it. It was. I just want to share another game with you. We have more time. Let's do another new game. And that was the wrong choice. Mm-hmm. We should have played something that we were familiar with and wrap up strong and enjoying a game as opposed to struggling through a new one.
And Lars, as for the similar term for analysis paralysis, I often use the word rude.
There's got to be they always say when you're talking about food, eyes bigger than your stomach. There's got to be something similar. It's the same concept. You assume that others' capacity or interest in learning games is bigger than it is.
We have a guy who's prone to analysis paralysis in our group, to the point of overdoing things, right? Like we played a logic game, and you simply had to cross off who was, each time we'd ask a question, and you'd cross people off on your sheet. That would eliminate them from the questions. And he would not only cross them off, but then we would have to wait for him to write down the possibilities and what turn it was on and who said the question. I was like, are you kidding? You do not need all that information. And so now when it's really funny. I'll get a game out, and he's like, he's coming over to Joyman out my mouth, and he'll say, I'll move fast, I promise. I haven't even said anything yet. Which is not true. He still isn't fast. But, at least he knows what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Cody says, are there board games that you'd like to see adapted into a TV show, movie, or video game? What do you think has potential to be successful in what medium? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cody, I'm trying to answer this question briefly because we get asked this all the time.
Very true.
For board games that I want to see a movie of, the answer is absolutely 0.
Oh.
Maybe HeroScape. HeroScape would be pretty cool.
Yep.
But
Duel of Ages could be some weird art film that nobody understands.
Well, Duel of Ages and HeroScape would be the same thing, right? Basically, they're the same theme.
That is true.
I don't want Hollywood touching my board games, man.
Yeah.
Did you see what they did to Battleship? Did you see it?
Yeah, that could have been an amazing film.
Now, Clue they did okay by, but they're remaking Clue this year.
Are they?
Do you have high hopes for it? I do not.
No. Why mess with Clue? Are they gonna... This hurts me. See, I was going to say Mice and Mystics would make an excellent animated film, but you have to go with a game that has a narrative element to it.
Eric. I mean, come on.
I still think Mice and Mystics would be an awesome cartoon. As far as the other direction, another move, I mean, we get this question all the time because I always throw out Stargate as an option, that we need a real good Stargate game. Zach is a big fan of the smash-up, shuffle-building mechanic. There's something very entertaining and thematic about combining two genres. It also lends itself to replayability should I want to try something new or want to master a different faction combo. I was curious, why do you think that more games don't employ the shuffle-building mechanic that Smash-Up does so well? Is it because Smash-Up does so well? Is it licensed or trademarked? What other game mechanics are you surprised by that aren't frequently used but should be, in your opinion?
The I split you choose mechanism is not used hardly at all.
Yeah.
It's in New York Slice. It's in, what's that game with the bridges?
San Marco.
I mean, really, I don't think I can make a top 10 list of it. Drafting, we're starting to see more drafting nowadays, but I still get excited when I see it. Dice placement, like Kingsburg, not a lot of games use that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the one I just talked about last week, the Nerdy Inventions game, that comes close. There have been a few. But I Split You Choose, yes, there was something recently that also went with that. Oh, the Mad Scientist game, like Mad Science Foundation. As far as me, I like the hand position management of Bonanza. And there's actually a game that just came in that I haven't had a chance to play yet from Sashi and Sashi that doesn't quite do exactly the same thing, but it is about adjusting the cards in your hand to come out of your hand in a proper order. And I'm really interested to try it out.
I don't know if I don't want that mechanism to be used in more games. It's a real pain.
I like the struggle.
You're such a mean person. I like to hold cards. My son shouldn't have a trophy he won.
I am very mean.
I need a tale of friendship.
Aw, it's time for a tale of friendship. The most recent election caused a rift between two of my wife's sisters, as I am sure it did in many families. For weeks after the election, my wife avoided Facebook, as she didn't want to watch the hateful and hurtful exchange between her family members. Thanksgiving this year ended up being split into two different groups, each in a different state. This last weekend, many of us gathered at my mother-in-law's house due to a death in the family. The two quarreling sisters showed up on different days and barely managed a polite hello to one another. Friday evening, after dinner was done and my kids were going to sleep, I rounded up a few people to play Ticket to Ride. The players were myself, the two sisters who were still upset at one another, and the daughter of one of them. I taught the rules, we started playing, and then something amazing happened. They started having fun. Together, in the same room. Catchphrases and inside jokes were created. Even though neither of them won the game, everyone came out a winner.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
That's a good story.
Oh, yeah.
Were they still okay the next day, though?
So that's like a PSA for board gaming.
I know. It shows a picture. Someone's frowning. Frowning. They come together, they start playing a game. A small smile. A little laugh. Pretty soon
and
they're
a piano
hugging.
Soundtrack.
And then we have a famous singer comes on and sings something about, why can't we be friends? You know, something. Okay, anyway. Alrighty. Let's talk about bringing up meeples.
Hey kids, what's it time for?
Bringing up the meeples!
With Dr. Max Davey.
Hello and welcome to Bringing Up the Meeples, where games and child development meet, get on well, and exchange phone numbers. I'm Max Davey. Very young children live exclusively in the moment, a characteristic that is by turns charming when playing in a cloud of bubbles and exasperating when trying to persuade them that if only they would put down the toy bus, then they can have an ice cream. In order to be able to plan and prioritise in a goal-driven way, the child needs to develop a set of skills grouped under the heading of executive function. Broadly, executive function needs skills in working memory, mental flexibility and self-control. Now, working memory isn't memory of what has just happened. It's about how much information you can hold in your head at once in order to make a decision. It's a shame people don't know this distinction, or we would be able to spare children and ourselves hours of playing terrible memory games, which aren't about working memory at all. Now, the mental flexibility they mention is the ability to switch from one strategy to another in response to changing situations in order to attain a particular objective. And finally, the self-control isn't resisting the temptation to throw the pieces around when a die roll doesn't go your way. I covered that last time in emotional resilience. It's the ability to delay a possible reward in order to obtain a greater one later on. This ability to delay gratification has been shown to be particularly important for later success in school, jobs, and pretty much any aspect of life. So this stuff is important. In a way, executive function is a kind of X factor that translates people's basic cognitive skills into achieving success in the real world. Of course, you've all spotted by now the potential for board games to help in this regard. And in fact, in Harvard University's excellent Developing Child's website, which I'll link to from the Guild, board and card games are consistently the top intervention listed for executive function. There's a lot of research that shows that games help, but which games and when? Unfortunately, I think research in this area seems to have gone up a blind alley a bit. Now, researchers like subjects to have a uniform experience of the game being studied. And what could be more uniform than the experience of a video game? So all the effort has gone into video game-based training. And recently, people have started to find, as usual, that games made within this sealed, hermetic video game environment are not generalised to the real world. Let's hope that people now turn their attention to the slightly more realistic tabletop. But in the meantime, what games can we suggest to help executive function? Well, given what skills we need to develop, any game where you're planning towards a particular goal, need to make decisions using multiple instruction points, working memory, and where your strategy will need to be adapted according to circumstance. So really, it's any game with strategy involved, as opposed to just turn-by-turn tactics. For older children, the choice is very wide, with Splendor, Ticket to Ride and Takenoko, I think, give a very accessible introduction to this kind of thing. For younger children, the choice isn't quite so wide, but I find Labyrinth, Connect 4 and Hey That's My Fish provide a good bit of strategy with minimal rules. So, playing games with some strategy can help children with their planning and working memory, but there are limits. My 12-year-old has been raised on strategy games and routinely beats me. But can he ever bring his sports kit home from school? I guess that's an ability he hasn't unlocked yet. This is Max Davey with Bringing Up the Meeple.
It's time for the Dice Tower's Question of the Week, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., in which our team of gaming experts answers one of your questions, thus increasing the odds that someone will get it right. This week's question: is there a level of component quality below which you will refuse to play a game?
Hi, Luke from the Broken Meeple, and I have put myself through hell in order to get a lot of games to the table despite bad component quality. Miniatures being glued together and stickers on wooden pieces I haven't minded. I've even had to go online to BGG and print out dividers for a lot of deck builders. But bad artwork, I don't mind to an extent. I've even got games like Legendary Firefly to the table, despite horrific artwork, but I do come close to not wanting to play for that. And certainly, if your game looks like some print-and-play experience, I'm not going to go anywhere near it. I'm talking 18XX, I'm talking Roads and Boats, I'm talking Food Chain Magnate. Seriously, if just a bit of colour wouldn't go amiss in some of your games. So, if it looks like I printed it off the internet, I don't want to play that game.
Hey, this is Paul Owen of Dice Tower News. I think I draw the line at having to cut things apart with scissors. Strangely, Phil Eklund's High Frontier, at least the edition that I have, has crew cards that have to be cut out with scissors. I don't understand that. In any case, that's a primary reason I never do print and play games. I don't know why, but that's where I draw the line. I shouldn't need scissors.
Hello, Ignacy Czujek, Portal Games.
And Stephen Bonacore, Stronghold Games. We are Board Games Insider.
And I refuse to play board games that have a paper board, like not cardboard, not sturdy, not mounted by the regular average paper. I don't like it, and I don't play such games.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, to me, really, it's game play that is ultimately important. So, I'll as long as the game is great, I'll play it on a paper board or any kind of thing. And Vegas Showdown has paper boards and is one of my favorites. Love it. So, I disagree with you, sir. I'll play any game as long as it's great.
This is Professor Scott Rogers of Biography of a Board Game. And is there a game component quality level at which I refuse to play a game? Well, the short answer is no. I played Warhammer 40k, which required me to glue together miniatures. I played lots of kids' games, which required me to build things. I guess what I really don't like is when you have to tear everything back down because it won't fit in the box. Games like Colt Express, you can put the trains assembled back in neatly into the box. I think that's really great. If I have to build something, have it remain built, so that way it provides a quick startup time for the next time we want to play. So games that require me to tear something down is going to get a lot less play in my household.
Hi, Sean from the Game Pit here. When it comes to gaming components, I do like a game to look good, but I will forgive it if it's a good game. But sometimes, if it just physically hinders the way you play the game, for instance, I'm 6'5", I've got huge hands, and when you get really thin pieces of cardboard or tiny little cubes or meeples or whatever that I really struggle to pick up, then it just becomes cumbersome and annoying and irritating, and I just don't want to play that game. So that's my biggest gripe.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski and component quality. Well, I play a lot of prototypes, so I've played with just cards made out of pieces of paper before, but in a published game, you know, it's just a thing, you know? I mean, bad art. I played this one game that had a wavy board with a glued on piece of paper and just cheap dice, and you know, cheap is cheap, and you're going to know it when you see it. And those types of games I don't like to play. But besides that, I'll play just about anything because I just like playing games.
I think my opinion matches up closely with Sean's. I get upset when the components physically make it difficult to play the game. Like they actively resist you using them the way they're supposed to be used. So like paper stock that's too thin, flimsy, too stiff. There's a game that's in the to-be-played pile that comes in a box. It's like a self-published thing. And for some reason, the box is made out of the stiffest, plasticky cardstock that's been riveted together and act like just prying. You have to pry it open to get the components out. And that just makes me angry. Shoddy printing, if the printing comes off, if the cards start to wear too quickly, pieces that are the wrong size for the spaces they're supposed to fit in. When you can't do what the game wants you to do, then I get upset and I just don't want to do it.
Well, everybody pretty much said what I was going to say. You know, there's the miniatures. I don't like to put miniatures together, so I usually won't play a game that makes me do that. I open a box and I'm like, nope. If I have to cut something out.
Yeah. I didn't think of that until I heard Paul talk about it. And yes, if you have to cut with scissors, you should not be having to cut. You should not need scissors.
I don't need to do the manufacturer's job for them.
Yes.
I've cut enough things in my life. I can't cut straight with scissors. I don't want to have to go ask my wife, who can cut straight with scissors, or use a paper cutter, which I don't even know if I own one at this point in time. And then the cards aren't the same size, which really makes me angry.
Yeah.
Most of the other stuff, like Mark mentioned, cheap dice, that doesn't bother me as much because no, we're not using these garbage dice. I throw them across the room and pull out some excellent dice that I have.
Easy to fix. Oh, speaking of dice, so, you know, many schools do a 100 days celebration for their 100th day of school, and my son had to get 100 of something, and we went and got 100 dice, and he picked them all out, picked which one he wanted to use. It was just kind of cool to count out a bunch of dice.
That is a good idea.
Yeah.
I would bring in 100 cubes and say, keep them. Hey, we made it to the end of another show.
We did.
But now we have sad news. We will be taking a 2-week hiatus here, folks. From the show. Now, this is not a bad thing. Don't feel like... Well, you might feel like it's a bad thing because you've nothing to listen to. But seriously, the Dice Tower Network exists. There are a lot of great podcasts out there for you guys to listen to. And most of you have not listened to the last 496 episodes, so you have plenty to go in and listen to. You can also go to Dice Tower Audio and listen to Board Game Breakfast and other shows that are put there. But anyhow, I digress. We need a couple weeks of audio preparation for episode 500.
Right. Basically, the time I'd be spending editing an episode, I have to start putting together some clips for 500. We want to make this special, and it's going to need some prep time.
Right. So episode 500 will actually be delayed a couple weeks. We're still recording it when we're at the Gamma Trade Show in March, and then we'll post it close to a month after that point. But, but you'll see it. Also, I'm going to do something else when we come back, but I'm going to check with Eric first to make sure we can.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to this, folks. Again, no big deal. There's lots of stuff coming out. We're not actually taking a break. We're just working on the audio, and I don't want to get so cramped that we throw together the show at the last minute.
Good idea.
So, anyway, thanks for listening to this show. We can't wait to hear from you guys in the future. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 496, was recorded on February 9th, 2016. Coming up next week, well, like Tom said, we're taking a break so I can start diving into the archives to get ready for episode 500. But we'll be back in just a few weeks with episode 497. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has become more than you can handle, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Improvised tennis matches in the Woodwind section provided by Oboe Rally. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including Four Corners of the Board, The Broken Meeple, Flip the Table, Start Space, The Game Pit, The Long View, The Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, and Board Game Blender. Find out more at DicetowerNetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming.
Okay, I know we told people we were working on that show, but we're really taking vacation here, so...
Yeah, I need to go somewhere warm. There's 1.5 feet of snow outside.
I'm going to go swimming today.